Good morning. This is Cecil and Blues. Thank you for joining me for another Final Fantasy XIV video. Recently, a small preview of the Void Ark went up on the 14 official webpage. It had a couple of screenshots and a piece of concept art, and most importantly, the item level requirement for the raid. That item level is 175. I expressed on Twitter at the time that I was a little disappointed with this number, and I feel like it's too low for our current environment. Twitter is a terrible place to attempt to explain a nuanced point, and so I didn't really go into a lot of detail there, but I wanted to go into detail here because it's a complicated issue. It deserves to be talked about. It's not a serious issue, but it is complicated. So, let's go into it. There are, in my opinion, two stages in MMO content. There's discovery and obligation. Discovery is the first time that you enter new content and figure out its mechanics. This stage lasts until you learn the content and beat it for the first time. After that, you enter the obligation stage, where you're participating in the content in order to acquire some carrot that the game has you chasing. Discovery is super fun. It is the most fun time for me in an MMO. I used to do this with friends, now I do this in Duty Finder, and I'm okay with that. If everyone's on the same page, Discovery can be just a lot of fun, with everyone trying to figure out the content. It's why I try and jump in as soon as possible when these patches go live, so that everyone's kind of in that discovery mode. And then, Obligation is fun too, though. I still have a blast running Alexander with my guild every week. We hang out in voice chat, and we talk, and we just have a casual, fun time. And that works when everyone's on the same page. It's nice, though, to have a spread, some distance between the two, extremes, where there's like maybe a process of tolerance. In week 1 of Alexander, there was a lot of learning, there was a lot of tolerance between people with maximum item level and people with minimum item level. During week 2 and week 3 of Alexander, groups were still very patient with new players and accepting of a wipe or two. By week 4, tolerance for new players or starting item level was getting thin, and by week 5, it was over. This was a natural progression. Minimum item level for Alexander was 170, and the maximum you could have had on the first week was 180. So there wasn't that big of a difference between the weakest player and the strongest player from a gear standpoint. And I know that there is a skill level difference that can exist between players who are trying their hardest and players who are playing a bit more casually. But as weeks went on, the average item level approached 190 because the gear that drops from Alexander is 190. So for anyone who is participating in Alexander every week, they approach that 190 point. They also learned the fights backwards and forwards because they had to run it multiple times each week to get those drops. And so by week 5, there was no longer a lot of tolerance for people who were 170 because they were just not experienced and they didn't have the gear. And it results in a lot of negativity, a lot of frustration. As time is going on, as we approach December here, November. I'm ahead of myself by a month. But as we approach November, the average item level is approaching 200. If you've kept up on your esoterics, if every week you've maxed out your esoterics, as of this week, you should have every piece of your primary specs gear except for one ring, because you can't have 2 item level 200 rings. So, the most casual hardcore player, the most hardcore casual, is that how that works? The most dedicated casual player, at minimum, has item level to like 199. And I am concerned going into this next raid patch. My fear is that it's not going to be week 15 where everyone is frustrated with people in item level 175 gear, but week 2 or even week 1. So it's concerning to me, because the item level 190 plus players are going to be thrown in there with possible just starting out level 50 characters with item level 175 gear. And what's more is the gear in here is not tokens, I don't think. It's going to be actual gear for a class. And so you're going to have quite a large portion of the population who is maybe coming into the content as an alternate spec. So I play as a monk. I have item level 200 gear. I don't need the monk gear from the Void Ark. I want maybe the summoner gear. Well, my summoner has got... I mean, okay, I've been running Alexander every week, so I've got Alexander gear for my summoner. But let's say I hadn't been. Let's say I hadn't kept up on that, and I have Esoterics gear that I've upgraded. So I've got 180 on my summoner. The damage difference between my summoner and my monk is huge, not only because of the gear differential, but because I play my monk all the time, and I am more experienced and confident in my rotation. So you're going to get a lot of players playing an alternate spec that they are trying to collect gear for so they can roll need on the things instead of greed. And I am concerned that is going to create a level of frustration and a culture of blaming other players, a lot of pointing fingers, blaming things on low DPS or bad healing, when in reality what's going on is misunderstood mechanics, and it doesn't matter if your gear is bad when you're not following mechanics. So I'm worried for the environment it's going to create, and I wonder if a higher item level requirement might have dampened that negative environment a little bit if the item level had been 185 or 190. That being said, content curve is an important issue, and making sure that there is a smooth flow from one tier of content to the next is important, which is certainly why stepping from Alexander's 170 item level to Void Ark's 175 feels pretty natural when you think about it in that context. A player who hits level 60 could farm a full set of law gear, enter Alexander, collect 3 accessories, a pair of boots, and reach item level 175, be able to access the Void Ark on the very same day. A very long day, but I'm pretty sure they could accomplish it in one day. They could definitely accomplish it in the same week, though, especially now that Alexander drops will no longer be limited, so you can collect a full set of Alexander gear if you wanted in one day, assuming you had some good rolls. In the long haul, this is probably the right item level for the content, but even still, maybe 180. I don't know. It's probably the right choice, and I'm sure that the long view was what the developers had in mind. Time is the enemy of this raid. If it had been introduced at the beginning of September, it would have been right in the pocket. 175 would have been perfect. But as we roll into November, tolerance for discovery is going to be at an all-time low. Players have too much gear, and this content is going to have to keep us busy for another 3 to 4 months before we see a jump forward to the next raid tier. And this content is where we're going to be acquiring the upgrade materials to get us to item level 210 for casual players. I understand that 210 is, that's the market of the true raiders, the people who are in Alexander Savage. Those guys are not who I'm concerned about. They're probably not going to be that focused on the Void Ark. They may show up there because it may speed up their process of upgrading their esoterics gear, which they might want to do just for cosmetic purposes. I don't know the stat weights. I'm a fairly casual player, as I hope is clear just by my opinions. That's my thoughts on it. We still have a couple of weeks before we get to dive into 3.1. What are your thoughts on it? Would you have liked to have seen bosses tuned to a higher item level, or do you think this is the right item level and challenge to be presented for the 24-man content? Sorry. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified when new videos are created. You can follow me on Twitter at itsboats, where I ramble about other things when I'm not rambling like I am right now. I should have stuck to my script a little bit closer. You guys have a good day.